I never thought something like this could happen to me. It was a calm night, the kind where the air was still, and even the moon seemed to be taking a break from casting its usual light. The kind of night where everything felt peaceful, almost too peaceful. Jake and I had just gone to bed after another uneventful day. He'd fallen asleep quickly, as he usually did, his breathing slow and steady. I'd always admired how easily he could drift off into sleep, while I often lay awake for hours, my mind racing with thoughts I couldn't shake. But tonight was different. Something about the stillness in the air, the quiet of the room, made me uneasy. I rolled over to face Jake, and that's when I saw it. His body was still, but his face was anything but calm. There was a strange tension in his features, his brows furrowed and his mouth slightly agape, as if something was pulling at him in his sleep. I was used to the occasional restless night, but this was different. Jake was never one to stir in his sleep like this. And then I saw it, his eyes. His eyes were open, but they weren't focused on anything. He wasn't looking at me. They were glazed over, staring blankly into the dark. It wasn't like he was sleepwalking or even having a nightmare. No, this was something else. My heart skipped a beat, and an inexplicable chill crawled down my spine. I should have woken him, asked if he was okay, but I didn't. I didn't want to disturb him, not when I couldn't explain the feeling swirling in my gut. Instead, I turned over, my back to him, and tried to ignore the unease gnawing at me. But I couldn't sleep. I tried to close my eyes, willing myself to forget about it, to just fall into the comfort of the blankets and the quiet, but my mind was buzzing too loudly. Every little sound felt amplified, the creak of the floorboards, the rustle of the trees outside the window, my own breath. Then, just as I was on the edge of drifting off, I heard it. His voice. Soft, barely above a whisper, but it sliced through the silence of the room like a knife. I know what you were doing, and I saw it. My breath caught in my throat. My heart stopped. The words echoed in my mind, and I felt every muscle in my body freeze, a cold sweat breaking out on the back of my neck. I didn't know how to respond, what to say, or even if I should say anything at all. I tried to keep my voice steady, to keep the panic from creeping in. What do you mean? I whispered, my words barely audible in the dark. Jake's response came with a chilling calmness, as though he were stating an undeniable fact. Don't pretend you don't understand. I know about your meetings with him. I saw you with him, in our bed. A rush of cold terror hit me all at once. How could he possibly know? My mind scrambled for answers, trying to grasp at anything that made sense. My pulse was racing, and my breath came in short, sharp gasps. I wanted to scream, to deny everything, but all I could do was lie there, paralyzed in the dark. The weight of his words, their finality, felt suffocating. I don't understand, I stammered, trying to hold onto some semblance of control, but I could already feel it slipping away. Jake didn't react, but I could feel his gaze, still blank, still unblinking, yet somehow piercing through the dark. You think you're clever, don't you? He said, his tone unchanging. But I've been watching, Sarah. I've always been watching. I wanted to deny it, to shout out and explain myself, but I couldn't. How could I explain something that had no excuse? How could I explain the guilt, the shame, the lies? And why did he sound so distant? Like none of this mattered to him anymore. My mind was spiraling. There was so much I wanted to say, to beg for his forgiveness, to tell him that it had been a mistake, that it was all just a terrible lapse in judgment. But in that moment, I realized the truth. Whatever this was, whatever he was planning, was no longer about forgiveness. It was about something far worse. I lay there, trembling, the weight of his words crushing me, and all I could do was listen to the silence that followed. Then, without another word, Jake seemed to slip back into his sleep. His breathing returned to its slow, rhythmic pattern, as if nothing had happened. But everything had changed. And I knew then that nothing would ever be the same again. The next morning, the house felt different. The air felt thick, as though it were holding its breath, waiting for something. Jake was sitting at the kitchen table, his back straight, sipping his coffee as if everything were perfectly normal. The light from the morning sun filtered through the blinds, casting long shadows across the room. But despite the warmth of the light, I felt a chill settle deep within me. My stomach twisted in knots as I tried to gather the courage to speak to him. My hands trembled as I poured myself a cup of coffee, the steam rising in the cool morning air, but the warmth of the drink didn't reach my insides. Every time I glanced at Jake, my heart beat faster, my mind racing with questions. How did he know? Had he been watching me? Had he seen more than I thought? My thoughts were all over the place, and I had no idea how to start, or what I even wanted to say. I wanted to apologize, to tell him that it had been a mistake, that I regretted everything. But how could I? The words felt hollow, empty before they even left my mouth. I wanted to explain myself, to somehow make it right. But I knew, deep down, that there was no making this right. Not anymore. I took a deep breath and tried to calm the storm raging inside me. The tension in the room was palpable. Jake hadn't looked up from his coffee, his expression unreadable. He was so still, so composed, that it only made the anxiety growing in my chest worse. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. I had to know how he found out. I approached the table slowly, my heart pounding with every step. "Jake, how did you know?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper, my throat tight. His eyes met mine then, and I saw it. There was no warmth in his gaze, no hint of the man I had once known. His eyes were cold, calculating, almost distant, as though he were looking at a stranger. He didn't answer at first, just continued to sip his coffee, taking his time, savoring the moment. I felt my palms begin to sweat, my pulse quickening. Finally, Jake put down his cup and leaned back in his chair, his gaze never leaving mine. His voice was low and even, carrying an eerie calm that made my skin crawl. "You really think I wouldn't notice?" he said. His words felt like a slap across my face. "You think I wouldn't see the late-night texts, the secrets, the lies?" He didn't wait for me to respond. Instead, he reached across the table and tossed my phone in front of me. I flinched as it landed with a soft thud on the wood. "You were sloppy, Sarah," he continued, his tone unwavering. "I know everything. Your messages, your plans. You thought you were being clever, sneaking around behind my back. But I was always watching." The room seemed to spin as I looked at the phone, my stomach sinking with the realization of what he was about to show me. My heart raced as I hesitated, but with a sickening feeling in my gut, I picked it up. I unlocked the screen, and there it was, our entire conversation, the text messages between me and Lars, laid out in front of me like a damning confession. The words were right there, plain as day, words I had hoped would never come to light. "I can't wait to see you tonight," I had written in one of the texts. "We'll meet at our usual spot," followed by more intimate exchanges, plans to meet again in the very bed I had shared with Jake. I felt my face flush with shame, my hands trembling as I scrolled through the messages. Each one felt like a nail in my coffin, the weight of my betrayal crushing me with every word. How could I have been so careless? Jake didn't seem to care about the details. He didn't need to read them. The look in his eyes told me everything I needed to know. "Did you think I was going to be responsible for all these years?" he asked, his voice cold and distant. "Did you think I'd just sit here, oblivious to your lies?" His words hit me like a freight train. I opened my mouth to say something, anything, but the words caught in my throat. What could I say? How could I possibly defend myself? Nothing I could say would make a difference now. Jake had seen it all. He knew everything. His voice was sharp, cutting through my silent panic. "You didn't just cheat on me, Sarah. You cheated on all of us. I know everything. And I had a plan." The words rang in my ears, and I could feel my world starting to unravel. "A plan," I repeated, my voice shaky. But Jake didn't elaborate. He simply gave me a look, one that I couldn't quite interpret but one that made my blood run cold. "You'll see," he said, his tone eerily calm. "You'll see what I've planned for you." I wanted to break down then, to beg him to forgive me, to tell him I was sorry. I wanted to plead for my life, for a chance to make it right. But I couldn't. I knew that whatever he had planned, it was already set in motion. I could feel the walls closing in around me. And before I knew it, Jake stood up, walking toward the door. He turned back to look at me, his face unreadable. "Get dressed. We're going for a walk," he said, his voice devoid of emotion. My legs felt weak beneath me, my body numb as I stood and followed him. I had no choice but to comply, my heart racing, my mind spinning with fear and confusion. As we left the house and stepped into the cool morning air, I had no idea what was waiting for me. But deep down, I knew that whatever it was, it wouldn't be good. I followed him in silence, my mind desperately searching for an escape, but I couldn't see one. The thought of what he might do to me, what he had planned, sent a chill down my spine. There was no way to undo the damage now. The story was already written, and I was just waiting for the final chapter to unfold. The walk through the woods felt surreal. The trees loomed around us like silent sentinels, their twisted branches reaching toward the overcast sky, casting long shadows across the dirt path. The air was cool and damp, thick with the scent of earth and decaying leaves. My breath came out in little clouds, and each step I took felt heavier than the last. I kept my distance from Jake, unsure of what to say, unsure of what to expect. He walked ahead of me, his gait steady and unhurried, but there was something about the way he moved, the way he held himself, that sent a shiver down my spine. He was calm, too calm, and that unnerved me more than anything. I had expected anger, tears, maybe even a confrontation, but Jake was beyond that. He was cold, calculating, and every step he took seemed deliberate, like he was leading me into something much darker than I could have imagined. I wanted to ask him what he was thinking, why he was taking me out here, but the words stuck in my throat. I didn't dare break the silence, afraid that whatever I said would only make things worse. We walked in uneasy silence for what felt like hours, the sound of our footsteps crunching over the fallen leaves the only noise between us. My heart thudded in my chest, each beat echoing in my ears. I wanted to scream, to run, but I couldn't. There was no way out. The fear gnawing at me was unlike anything I had ever felt. I tried to stay calm, to steady my breath, but the weight of the situation pressed down on me harder with every step. My thoughts kept racing, tumbling over each other in an endless loop, each one more desperate than the last. What did he want from me? Why was he doing this? Was this really happening, or was it all some twisted nightmare? Eventually, we reached a clearing, and Jake stopped. The trees parted, revealing a small patch of grass, the light filtering through the canopy above, casting everything in an eerie glow. He turned to face me then, his expression unreadable, and for the first time, I noticed something unsettling in his eyes, a glint of something dark and twisted. My breath hitched as I took a step back, instinctively wanting to put more space between us. But Jake didn't move. Instead, he stared at me, his gaze piercing, as though he were seeing right through me. I wanted to look away, to run, but I couldn't. His presence was suffocating, and it felt like the world had narrowed down to just the two of us, locked in this moment where everything was about to change. You don't understand, do you, Sarah? Jake's voice cut through the silence, low and controlled. You think you can get away with this. You think you can lie and cheat, and everything will just go back to normal. But it doesn't work that way. Not with me. I opened my mouth to say something, to explain myself, but he held up a hand, silencing me. No, he said firmly. You don't get to explain yourself. Not anymore. You had your chance. His voice dropped, and for the first time, I heard something cold in it, something final. But now, you're going to see what happens when you betray me. You're going to see what happens when you think you can get away with it. I felt a cold knot form in my stomach as I realized what he was saying. My heart raced, my legs trembling beneath me. The fear that had been building inside me was now suffocating, threatening to choke me. Jake, please, I whispered, my voice cracking. But he wasn't listening. He wasn't even looking at me anymore. He was focused on something beyond me, and I knew that whatever came next, I wouldn't be able to stop it. He took a step forward, and before I could react, he grabbed my hand, his grip like iron, forcing me to move with him. I tried to pull away, but his hold was unyielding, and I felt a sickening sense of dread wash over me. My legs were shaking so badly that it was all I could do to keep from collapsing, but Jake didn't seem to notice. He led me deeper into the woods, the path now narrower, the trees more densely packed, their branches casting dark, tangled shadows across the ground. The air felt heavier here, colder, as if the very forest itself was closing in around me. I could hear the faint rustling of leaves, the occasional snap of a twig underfoot, but otherwise, there was nothing. Just the sound of our footsteps, the beating of my heart, and Jake's steady breathing. I tried to pull free again, but he was too strong. The fear inside me was now a living, breathing thing, wrapping around my chest like a vice. Jake, please, I begged again, my voice strained. Where are we going? What do you want from me? But Jake didn't answer. He just kept walking, his pace unrelenting, until we reached a point where the trees seemed to fade away, leaving only a vast, empty space ahead of us. My breath caught in my throat as I looked around, feeling disoriented, lost in the unfamiliar surroundings. I didn't know where we were anymore, and that terrified me more than anything else. And then, without warning, Jake stopped. He turned to me, his grip on my hand suddenly loosening, and I stumbled slightly as I regained my balance. I thought it would hurt you, he said quietly, his tone strange, almost detached. I really did. I thought seeing your world crumble would make you feel the way I did. But I changed my mind. I blinked, confused, trying to make sense of his words, but before I could respond, he let go of my hand completely. I chose a different path, he said softly, almost as if to himself. And then, before I could even process what was happening, Jake turned and disappeared into the darkness, vanishing into the trees with an unsettling silence. I stood there, alone in the clearing, my heart hammering in my chest, a chill running through me that had nothing to do with the cold. The world felt still, too still, as if time itself had frozen. I didn't understand what was happening. I didn't know where Jake had gone or what he had meant by his words, but I felt an overwhelming sense of dread settle in my bones. I looked around, hoping to see something, anything that would explain this, but there was nothing. The woods were empty, silent, and I was completely alone. The fear gripped me tighter, and I felt my legs give way beneath me. I collapsed to the ground, my hands trembling as I tried to steady myself. What was happening? Why had he left me here, alone, in this dark place? What was he planning? But the answers weren't coming. There was only the cold, the silence, and the unbearable feeling that I was trapped in some twisted game where I was the one who had lost. I woke up on the cold, hard floor, my entire body aching as if I had been thrown there and left to suffer in silence. My hands were tied behind my back, the rough rope digging into my skin, and for a moment, I couldn't remember where I was. My eyes fluttered open, and the dim light from a small, filthy window gave just enough clarity to reveal the stark, concrete walls surrounding me. I could feel the chill of the air pressing against my skin, the oppressive silence settling around me like a thick fog. My pulse quickened as I realized I was in some kind of bunker, a place I didn't recognize, a place that seemed as cold and abandoned as the feelings coursing through me. Panic surged through me, and I struggled against the ropes binding my wrists, but they were too tight, cutting into my flesh with each desperate attempt to break free. I could feel my breath quickening, a tightness in my chest threatening to suffocate me, and I tried to calm myself, tried to think, but my thoughts were jumbled, my mind racing to make sense of what had just happened. Where was Jake? What had happened? I remembered the woods, the chilling moment when he had disappeared into the darkness, leaving me standing there, trembling in the cold emptiness. Had I passed out? Had something happened after that? I couldn't remember. I swallowed hard, fighting the rising panic, trying to push away the cold fingers of fear tightening around my chest. I needed to think. I needed to figure out how to escape. I tugged at the ropes again, but it was no use. They wouldn't give. My mind was reeling, spinning through everything that had led me here. The infidelity, the lies, the betrayal. I had thought I was clever, that I could keep everything hidden, but Jake had known. Jake had always known. I hadn't realized until now that everything I had done, every lie, every secret, had been part of some twisted plan of his. He hadn't been clueless. He hadn't been oblivious. He had been watching, waiting, orchestrating all of this from the very beginning. And that's when it hit me, Jake hadn't just found out about my affair with Lars. No, it was far worse than that. He had known long before I even realized the consequences of my actions. He had set this all up, manipulated the situation to expose my lies, to break me in ways I hadn't even imagined. I felt sick to my stomach, the realization washing over me like a wave of ice-cold water. He had been playing me, all along. He had been using my own betrayal against me. I had thought I was the one in control, but Jake had always been the one pulling the strings. Every message, every meeting with Lars, it had all been part of his plan. Suddenly, I heard the sound of footsteps approaching, echoing through the cold, concrete hall. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. My mind scrambled for any idea, any plan that could save me, but there was nothing. There was nowhere to run, no way to hide. The door to the room opened with a heavy creak, and Jake stepped inside. He was calm, too calm, his face unreadable, but there was something in his eyes, a glint of something darker, something that made my blood run cold. He didn't look surprised to see me struggling against the ropes, nor did he seem to care about the panic that was clearly evident on my face. He stood there for a long moment, just watching me, his gaze piercing, and I could feel my breath catch in my throat. His silence was deafening, and I couldn't look away from him. Every part of me wanted to scream, to beg for freedom, to apologize, but I couldn't. I was frozen in place, my body stiff with fear, my mind reeling from the realization that I had no idea what he was going to do to me next. After what felt like an eternity, Jake finally spoke. "Did you think I didn't notice anything?" he asked, his voice smooth and steady, but there was a coldness in it that made my skin crawl. I wanted to say something, to explain, but the words wouldn't come. I couldn't find my voice, couldn't find the strength to speak. It felt as if the walls around me were closing in, the air thick with the weight of everything that had led me to this moment. Jake took a step closer, his eyes never leaving mine, and I felt a chill run through me. "You thought you could deceive me, didn't you?" he continued, his words like daggers. "You thought you could get away with all of it, the lies, the cheating, the deceit. But I've been watching you, Sarah. I've always been watching. And now? Now it's time for you to face the consequences of your actions." His words sent a wave of nausea through me. He wasn't angry, not in the way I expected. No, there was something worse about the way he spoke, something colder, more calculated, as though he had been waiting for this moment for far longer than I realized. This wasn't just about revenge. This was about something much deeper, something I couldn't understand. I wanted to plead with him, to beg him to let me go, but I knew it wouldn't matter. He wasn't listening. He didn't care. Lars wasn't real, he said suddenly, his voice sharp. He was a fake. A puppet I used to get you here, to expose you for what you really are. My blood ran cold at the words. What? I whispered, my voice barely audible. But Jake didn't answer. He just stared at me, a cold, calculating expression on his face. You're not the person you think you are, Sarah, he said. And I've been working to reveal that to you. All of this, everything that's happened, it was a plan to show you who you really are, to show you just how far you've fallen. I felt a rush of guilt, of shame, flood through me. But it wasn't just guilt for what I had done. It was guilt for the realization that Jake had known, that he had always known, and that everything I had done, every choice I made, had been part of his plan all along. There was no way out now. I had been trapped from the very beginning, manipulated, used as a pawn in his game, and now there was no escaping the consequences. Jake's expression softened, just slightly, but there was no warmth in it. I'm giving you one last chance, he said quietly. You can come back to me, but only on my terms. If you don't, well, then I guess we'll both know what you're really worth. The words hung in the air between us, heavy and suffocating. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know what to say. I had no way of fixing this, no way of undoing the damage. Jake had already won. He had exposed me for who I really was, and now I had to decide whether I was willing to crawl back to him, to accept his terms, or whether I would let everything fall apart. But I couldn't think clearly. The room spun around me as I realized how much I had lost, how far I had fallen. And as I sat there, bound and helpless, I realized that my life, my future, had already been taken from me. Jake had won. And now, there was nothing left for me but to choose whether to beg for his forgiveness or let everything crumble to dust. When I returned home, everything felt different, as if the walls themselves were closing in on me. The familiar comfort of the house, once a place where I felt safe and secure, had become a cold, hollow shell. I could barely recognize the place anymore. It was as if the life I had built, the person I had been, had already been taken away from me. I walked through the front door, but there was no warmth in the air, no sense of belonging. It was all gone. The house, the art, the career I had spent years cultivating, it all felt meaningless now. The paintings in my studio, the ones I had poured my heart into, now seemed like nothing more than empty strokes on canvas, like pieces of a life that never truly belonged to me. Each brushstroke felt like a lie, a distraction from the truth I had been avoiding. The life I had tried so hard to build had crumbled, and I was left standing in the wreckage, trying to make sense of a world that no longer made sense. Jake had taken everything from me. The career I had fought for, the future I thought I could have. I saw it all slipping through my fingers, like sand falling from a cracked hourglass. My mind spun with the overwhelming realization that it was all over. There was no going back. The choices I had made, the lies I had told, had led me to this point, and now I was paying the price. Jake had exposed me, not just for my infidelity, but for the lies I had told myself about who I was. I had tried to convince myself that I could get away with it, that I could live two lives without consequence. But Jake had known all along. He had been the one in control, the one who had planned it all from the start, and now that I was broken, now that I had nothing left, he was giving me a choice, a twisted, impossible choice that seemed to mock me. I stood in front of my paintings, staring at the ones that had once brought me joy, the ones I had poured my soul into. They no longer felt like expressions of my creativity. They felt like hollow remnants of a life I no longer recognized. The vibrant colors, the bold strokes, they had all been part of an illusion, a carefully constructed facade that had kept me distracted from the truth. I ran my fingers across the surface of one painting, the texture feeling foreign beneath my touch. My hands trembled, and I felt a lump rise in my throat. This was all I had left, the work I had done, the life I had built. But it no longer mattered. Everything felt like it was slipping away from me, and I was powerless to stop it. Jake had taken it all, piece by piece, until there was nothing left but the bare bones of a life that had never been mine to begin with. The weight of it all pressed down on me, suffocating me with the realization that I had no choice but to face the consequences of my actions. Jake had given me an ultimatum, but it wasn't one I could accept. I couldn't go back to him, not after everything he had done, not after everything I had done. But if I didn't go back, if I didn't submit to his control, then everything I had worked for would be destroyed. The life I had built, The person I had thought I was would disappear in an instant. I felt trapped, caught between the life I had known and the man who had torn it apart. There was no escape, no way to fix what I had done. And as I stood there in front of my art, my future, my career, everything that had once meant something to me, I realized that it was all a lie. A lie I had told myself in order to justify the choices I had made. And now, that lie was falling apart, leaving nothing behind but the stark, painful truth. I turned away from the paintings, my gaze drifting to the empty room behind me. It was strange. Everything still looked the same, yet it felt completely different. The furniture was in its place, the same familiar items scattered around the house. But the emptiness of it all seemed to echo louder now. The room, once a place of comfort, now felt like a reminder of everything I had lost. The memories of the life I had shared with Jake, of the plans I had made, seemed so distant, like they belonged to someone else. I felt like a stranger in my own life. And the hardest part was realizing that I had brought this upon myself. My own choices had led me here, and now there was no way to undo the damage. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself, but it was no use. The weight of the situation was crushing me. I could feel the walls closing in, the suffocating pressure of knowing that everything I had worked for, everything I had believed in, was slipping through my fingers. The house, the art, the career, all of it was now just a shadow of the past, a reminder of who I used to be. And I was left standing in the ruins of my own life, trying to figure out what came next. Jake had given me a choice, but it wasn't really a choice at all. If I went back to him, I would be giving up everything I had worked for. I would be living in his shadow, accepting his terms, forever bound to the life he had created for me. But if I didn't go back, if I didn't give in to his control, I would lose everything I had left. My career, my future, my identity, it would all be gone. I was standing at a crossroads, and I couldn't see a way out. No matter what I did, there was no going back. My past had already caught up with me, and now I had to face the consequences of everything I had done. And as I stood there, staring into the empty room, I realized that the hardest part wasn't making the choice. It was realizing that I had already lost. Everything I had, everything I thought I could hold on to, had already been taken from me. The choice I had to make wasn't about what to do next. It was about accepting the truth, that I had lost myself, that I had let it all slip away. And now, there was nothing left but the hollow, empty shell of the person I once was.